Hey bookworms,
I'm Book Mouse,
and I'm Book Kitty,
and this is
our BookNook. Today, because we are still in self-isolation, though Book Mouse over here is actually quarantined.
yeah.
Got somebody positive in the house. Sad. But she's doing better. So, without much further ado, we're going to do the Opposites book tag. I got it from Dreamland Book Blog, and they had a link to the original poster, but it said the video was deleted. So I don't know who actually originated this book tag, but I got it from Dreamland's book blog. Dreamland book blog, sorry, I misspoke. So here we are in self-isolation and quarantine. And our first question in the Opposites book tag I'm going to pose to you, Book Mouse. What was the first book in your collection and the last book that you bought?
Okay. So my first book in my collection comes from way long ago, like junior high. And it would be Anne McCaffrey's Restoree.
I think we've heard of that one before from you.
Yeah, so that was one of the first books that I got introduced to her, and it started the monster that had to have everything. The last book I bought was actually before quarantine. I bought Jane Castle's Illusion Town. It's one of her Harmony books with the dust bunnies.
Let's see. The first book that I honestly can't tell you what the first book from my collection was, but my best guess, based on looking at them and thinking back, I put The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. Really interesting book. It really changed my outlook on the world and will always be in my collection because of that. The last book I bought was actually last week. I was reading the House of Night series, and I got all the way up to just before the last book and realized that the reason I didn't remember how it ended is because I didn't have the last book. So my lovely partner ordered it from Amazon right then and there, and I got it a few days later and finally read it. So the last book that I bought is Redeemed by PC Cast and Kristen Cast.
All right. So number 2 on the book tag is a cheap book and an expensive book. I'll go real quick. My cheap book I actually found at Half Price Books and Records. Lovely place. I tend to shop there a lot. I got Kushiel's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. I'd actually had it a long time ago and lost it, and it just happened to be on the shelf, and I was like, I want it back. So I got that really cheap at half price. But my expensive book, I actually purchased a really nice, detailed, complete works of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, as they were printed in Strand magazine originally. They were a series that he printed in the newspaper. It even has the original little ink drawings that appeared in the newspaper. So that was my expensive book.
I can see that.
How about you?
Well, for my cheap book, I honestly had to pick from a bunch of books because I more than once have gotten handfuls and boxes of books from garage sales, all of which were really cheap. But the only one I know for sure came in that box was Lipstick Jungle by Candace Bushnell, the author of Sex and the City. It's about powerful women in the corporate, quote-unquote, man's world. And the expensive book on my shelf, I honestly had to take a guess at this because when I actually have money to spend, I don't really pay attention to how much a book costs because it doesn't matter. If I want the book, I want the book. And, that's one thing is I'll never tell myself no to a book unless, of course, I literally have no money to spend on it. But anyway, the expensive one I chose was Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles. It was the Barnes & Noble, fancy cover edition, and it's got all 3, Interview with the Vampire Lestat, and The Queen of the Damned, all in one. It's got gilded pages. It is beautiful. And I think it cost around $20 to $30. Not ashamed. No regrets. No regrets. So, Mouse, Number 3 is a book with a male protagonist and a book with a female protagonist.
Okay, so for my book with the male protagonist, I chose Cross Time Saloon by Spider Robinson. It actually has two male protagonists. You have, of course, Callahan, who runs the saloon and is in charge of keeping everybody under his wing. But then you have the narrator, Jake, who is actually pivotal to a lot of the stories because of his observations of what's happening. And he plays a part in later books.
Good
So
description.
I chose that for my male. For my female, I chose Arrows of the Queen by Mercedes Lackey.
No surprise there.
I love my Valdemar books, but the Arrows of the Queen, you have Talia, who is the main protagonist of all three books that are combined into one. And it's all her adventure from being chosen to becoming the Queen's own in her own right. So, I picked Queen's Arrows of the Queen.
And if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and check out our video about Arrows of the Queen. I'll post a link in the description below.
All right, so what did you pick for a male?
Actually, for this entire question, I chose series rather than a singular book for both sides. I figured if I was going to do it for one, I should do it for the other. So for the male protagonist, I actually chose The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. You know, Aragon. Everybody recognizes it by Aragon. Some people don't realize it's called The Inheritance Cycle. Anyway, the one I chose for my female protagonist was the House of Night series by PC Cass and Kristen Cass. I know I've been talking about this series a lot lately, but I did just reread it. And it was a huge inspiration for my own book that I'm working on. But the series follows Zoe Redbird, who is literally like the events in the book that happen and the success that happens at the end would not happen without her. She is absolutely the center of all of it. So, very good example of a female protagonist. Number 4 is a book you read fast and one that took you very long to read. The one that took you long to read.
Okay, so I actually peeled through The Alchemist by Michael Scott, The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel.
Which we also did a video on, and I will put the link below for that as well.
Yeah, I was surprised at how quickly I went through that book. It's not exactly a tiny book, but it was a like a mind-capturing book, so I whipped through it pretty quick.
And it's also really easy to read, too,
it is.
Being at our age.
Yeah, it actually really was a good read. I definitely got that one for my quick read. Oddly enough, The Stand by Stephen King took me a long time to read. It's already a thick book, but I don't know if it was life or the content. It was really hard for me to get through because it's a horrible post-apocalyptic book. But it actually took me a while to get through that. And I caught myself having to go back and reread. Like if I stopped for a little bit, I would have to go back and reread the chapter before to catch my brain up. So
Stephen King always takes me forever to get through.
Yeah, well, sometimes he gets into a lot of detail, and you really have to work through the detail because later it comes up important. So that's what I picked for my fast and slow read. How about you?
A book I read fast. I literally just wrote most of them. I read each book in the House of Night series. Like I read like 2 or 3 in a night once when I spent the whole night reading. But the majority of them I read within a day. There's been several books I've read within 4 hours. So I really can't pinpoint that. But most books I read through pretty fast. But the one that took me forever to read is The Princes of Ireland by Edward Rutherford. It is a book that starts in tribal pre-Christian Ireland and goes all the way through to like St. Patrick and the coming of the Vikings and the founding of Dublin, and it is heavily historical fiction and really well written and just awesome. But it took me forever to get through. I read it when I was pregnant years ago. Number 5, a pretty cover and an ugly cover.
Okay. For a pretty cover, I had to pick Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nagan.
Yes.
It was such a gorgeous it was abstract but concrete and beautiful and flowing. I really had to pick that cover. We also did a video on this book, and if you look below, we'll post the link for it. Ugly. I really had to think about this, and I actually came up kind of blank, but then I realized, oh my lord, any sci-fi book from the 70s.
Any
Those
of
were
them.
some, oh my god, they were some horrible covers. And I don't know if it was just the time period or people were losing their shit, but yeah, I when I think back to some of the covers that I've looked at on these books, they are like boobs akimbo. I mean, the girls were all scantily clad, or and the guys were all over muscled, and the ray guns were impossible. Yeah, so I'm picking anything from the 70s. Oh, what'd you end up picking?
I actually, funny enough, went with The Alchemist by Michael Scott for the pretty cover. It's got some really great geographical designs on it. It kind of, honestly, the cover to me really screams alchemy, and I think that it's attractive, but it also is attractive because it goes so well with the book itself. The ugly cover, I actually chose this book on my shelf that I still have yet to read, called The Supernatural by Douglas Hill and Pat Williams. And I think it's ugly because it's lacking. We're not able to do video while we're doing our self-isolation here, but I am showing Bookmouse the cover right now, and
What is that supposed to be?
and then it gets worse. On the back, there are 6 eyeballs, and the rest is black. So, I mean, I think it's just ugly because it doesn't seem very well thought out, and it doesn't, it's just, it's so lacking. There's so much empty space. There's so much black space. It just, I think it's hideous. But that's what I got for the ugly one. Number 6 is a national book and an international book.
So I actually struggled with this until we talked about it a little bit. I ended up picking for a national book, Night of the Living Trekkies by Kevin David Anderson and Sam Stahl. We also covered this in one of our book reviews.
I think that was our second video.
It was one of our early ones. So I definitely picked that one. And then for international, I went old, like pre-10. Oh gosh, this must have been written in 1021, 1022. A Tale of Genji. It is a Japanese book. It's unique in that it was written by a woman back when women weren't supposed to be reading or writing or being literate. It's by Murasaki Shikibu. She was a lady in waiting, a noblewoman in the court. And it's actually gone international because of its historical aspects, but also just it's a good story. I mean, it's a work of fiction, but it's a really powerful story. And so I picked that for my international book. What did you pick for national?
Let's see. I wrote these opposite. My national book that I chose was The Deep End by Kristen Ashley. This is not meant for underage readers. Let me just put that out there. This book is definitely for adults. It does cover, I mean, the entire thing is centered around adult themes. So keep that in mind, but it was amazing. And the international book I chose was A Thousand Splendid Suns by, please forgive me if I mispronounce this or butcher it in any way, but A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. This is the same author that did Kite Runner. I have both books on my shelf. Embarrassingly, I have yet to read either one of them, but I am slowly working through my unreads on my shelf, and there are many. Number 7 is a thin book and a thick one. My thin book I chose was To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. It's an excellent book. It's a classic, but it's tiny. It's really thin compared to the rest of the books on my shelf. Matter of fact, I almost lost it because of how small it is. And I only have, I think, one book smaller than that, and that is John Steinbeck's short story, The Pearl. But it's a short story, so I didn't know if that counted. My thick one I chose was The Unabridged Edgar Allan Poe. I love Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know, I really love Edgar Allan Poe. My favorite is The Cask of Amontillado. But I have a paperback, and it's bigger than my Vampire Chronicles. It's bigger than Princess of Ireland. It's the thickest book I've got, and it's in paperback. That's insane. So what have you got for thin and thick?
All right, so for my thin book, I ended up picking another Anne McCaffrey, The Kalura. It is one of her early works. It's a very short story, but it's a very sweet story, and I love it. It's one of my early books that I read after Restory. So I picked Anne McCaffrey's Kalura, and then for a thick book, oh my gosh, anything out of the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. I mean, the first book, Eye of the World, is huge, and it's paperback. So it's like you said, for a paperback book to be that thick, it's wow. I mean, not that it's not a fast read, because you get sucked into the story quick. So number 8 is going to be a fiction book and a nonfiction book. What did you pick for your fiction?
I chose The Under the Dome by Stephen King. I have volume 1 and volume 2. I bought both of them at airports. I think I got one at an airport, and then I got volume 2 at bookstore probably. And my nonfiction book was actually really difficult for me because I don't really have a lot of nonfiction books, but I do have Shark Tank's Jumpstart Your Business from the show Shark Tank. So I got that for Christmas not this past Christmas, but the year before. And yeah, so that's what I have for nonfiction. How about you?
Well, okay, so for fiction, I went way back. I picked a book that was my favorite when I was in junior high, early high school. I picked A Girl of the Limberlost by Jean Stratton Porter. It's a turn of the century setting. It's a sweet book about the coming of age of a girl who grows up very poor, but dreams of getting a higher education, and everything she fights for and goes through to get out of the swamp, basically, where she's been born and raised. And it's a really sweet book. And my nonfiction, I picked Origins by Neil deGrasse Tyson. I actually got to see him speak live at the local college, and got to ask him a question during the forum, and I bought the book. So we're getting towards the end. Number 9, what did you pick for a very, as in way too much, romantic book and an action book?
Let's see. Too romantic? Anything by Nicholas Sparks, to be completely frank with you. My entire Nicholas Sparks collection, I would say, is just a little bit too much on the romance. I don't think I need to say anything else about that. The action book I chose was actually The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. It is fast-paced. It has a little bit of mystery, too, but there's definitely some action in there for sure. I'm pretty sure there's some explosions. It's been a while since I've read it, but definitely action-centered. And while there is a little bit of a hint of a possible romance, it's not a major part of the story, so I think it's pretty realistically done.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. It was tasteful.
And very minimal. It wasn't integral to the plot.
Right, so they didn't harp on it.
It was realistically done in the fact that, like, yeah, when people are doing educational searches and studies, yeah, they're going to start to have crushes on people, but it's not going to be the thing they're focusing on because they're focused on their learning and their discovering.
So I don't know if you want to call this so much romance as just too damn much sex. But, initially, and I think I've complained about this in other videos, initially Anita Blake's series by Laurel K. Hamilton was plot driven. There was murders, there was exploring her abilities as a necromancer and the supernatural world that she had to, or the preternatural world that she had to navigate. Towards the end, it's just who could she sleep with? What new supernatural creature was she sleeping with? And I just couldn't stand it anymore. So I picked Anita Blake's series by Laurel K. Hamilton as Too Much Romance, which read as too much sex and not enough story for me. But my action book is one that we covered in one of our videos. Another one, because it was full of action. It was full of movement and constant pace. I picked Necrotech by Casey Alexander.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a good choice.
Yeah, so definitely check out the link for that one down below. That was a great book that we reviewed. So that was my Write Too Much Romance and then my action book. And now we're up to number 10.
The last question.
Last question. A book that made you happy and one that made you sad. And I managed to do it all in one.
Oh?
I picked one book. I am a huge Anne McCaffrey fan. And a lot of fans followed her entire Pern series, all the major characters, all their ups and downs. She wrote a book called All the Wares of Pern. It was a wonderful book. It made you excited because these are people that actually immigrated from Earth that lost contact with all their past. They didn't even know that they had really come from another planet. This one is kind of tying up towards the end of the Pern series. Lots of major characters that you've fallen in love with over the other books that she's written. And it's just a really powerful coming together of the whole planet. So it really made me happy and seeing these people achieve what they've been trying to achieve. But it was also one of my saddest books because you lose one of the major characters. And I actually cried reading this book. It's heart-wrenching. So the joy of these people finally getting to achieve their end goals and then the loss of this major character, it pulls you in both directions.
Wow. I think that's one of the things that makes a book good. And that's why this question was actually hard for me because, every book will make me feel a myriad of emotions. I mean, any good book will have you go up and have you go down and have you go sideways. Like, your emotions are all over the place based on what's going on in the book, if it's written well. But I read this question to okay, in the end, how did I feel? And that's what I tried to use. So for my happy book, I actually chose Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, depending on where you live. Really made me happy. I mean, it's a school of magic. I mean, who doesn't dream of going to a school of magic and being told you're a wizard at 11 years old? Cynics. That's about it. Just cynics. And for my sad one, I chose The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold.
That's a good one.
It is a good one, but it's so sad. Oh my gosh, the things that this girl goes through. I probably cried 4 times at least during this book, including the end. And that's actually why I haven't reread it. 1, I don't think the impact is going to be the same. And 2, I don't want to cry all the time. I mean, I get in certain moods when I want to cry like anybody else, but why would I choose to read a book just that I know is going to make me cry?
Yeah.
But it was such a lovely book, really well written, and the author did a really good job of really getting into the emotion of it, clearly. So that's what we've got for the Opposites book tag. Thank you for joining us during this time of isolation and social distancing.
And quarantine.
Don't forget to subscribe below and ring that bell so you know when we post new videos. And in addition to the links to the videos that we mentioned before, we will also post where to find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, and Patreon.
We wish you all the best in this time of confusion and chaos. We know that it can be hard being isolated from our friends and families and having to cope with our new reality. But just remember, YouTube is out there. There are lots of online resources. Just because we are isolated does not mean we can't reach out. So be sure to reach out and say hey to somebody.
Even if it's us. Leave a comment below. Let us know how you're spending your isolation, your quarantine time. Let us know if you've read any of these books that we've mentioned. let's get a discussion going and keep each other company. So thanks for joining us. This has been
Book Mouse.
And I'm Book Kitty.
And we are now signing on.